I guess in sport, they always say it's the hope that kills you, and that is exactly what I'm feeling right now. After England led the Test match for the large majority, it was a late penalty via the boot of Andre Pollard from a scrum around the halfway point, in which put South Africa into the lead going into the dying minutes, in which they managed to hold on to and book themselves a place in a Rugby World Cup final. As an English supporter, I'm absolutely gutted. I'll definitely say it was a drop goal from Owen Farrell which really instilled the hope in me that this England team were really putting together one of the most special performances in their history. But ultimately the champions, the reigning and defending World Cup champions, turned up in the last 10 minutes, which is really when it mattered. They needed a try and a penalty, all converted, to win the match, and they did exactly that. It was a try from RG Snyman which got them over the whitewash and broke the try scoring deadlock. And then, as I said, it was a penalty from Andre Pollard from the halfway to win the match. Devastating. The Springboks have inflicted Rugby World Cup pain 2 cycles in a row, which is very, very disappointing. I can be very proud of the English effort. That's one thing I will state. As much as I'm disappointed and gutted that we couldn't hold on at the end, I'm very proud of this English team. Many of people, completely writ England off going into the tournament. Me personally, I thought this game was going to be a real tall order and could become a real uphill battle, but the English stuck in there from the word go. I'd say the wet conditions definitely helped England. They played the conditions better than South Africa. Some brilliant kick chase was one of the main pointers in which helped England gain the field position in which they could kick the drop goals and then secure the penalties and 3 points. The game was hugely physical. Both teams were really up for it. Credit to South Africa and England. They were both had a huge amount of emotional energy, and the tackles were just absolutely colossal. Both teams really putting their heart on the line. In terms of the set piece, it was a really good battle actually. In the first half, the scrums, from an English point of view, I was very pleased with. Managed to lock out with Joe Marler and Dan Cole, a selection in which I really, really doubted was actually the best option. And credit to Steve Borthwick, I believe he did get his selection correct there. I didn't really believe him, the selection he went with. I thought Genge starting would have been a better option, but I was definitely proven wrong there. The line-out was a real good contest with both teams, of Maratoji stealing a good amount of ball for England, and Moster and Etzebeth disrupting some English ball as well. There was plenty of handling errors. It was really a gritty sort of test match feel game, but both teams had unreal defence. It was a very greasy ball, but it did take until late in the second half for the tries to be scored. A try from RG Snyman, which was a well-constructed try, I'll have to say. Springboks got the penalty, went to the corner because they needed more than 3 points. They sort of dummy mauled it. England massively overcommitted to the maul. They broke off, went a couple phases, and the power of RG Snyman went down the outside centre channel of Joe Marchant to score the try. So fair play to the South Africans there. I thought the English maul defence was superb. The South Africans really struggled to get some go forward there. But ultimately, it didn't matter in the end. The Springboks found a way to cross the line in a slightly different manner. What disappointed me with England? Well, it's hard to be disappointed when the expectations going into the match was that England would get dealt with quite handily. But what I will say was the relatively poor game management towards the end. I think it was really late on in the game. England had a line out 5 metres out, and I believe we're 9 points in the lead already. That is a position in which we really have to close the game out there. It was then a not straight from Jamie George, which gave South Africa the scrum. I think they might have got a penalty or they might have cleared it. And then Jamie George with the second line out. Unfortunately, it just completely slipped out of his hands and was one of the weirdest line-out throws I've ever seen, but I guess that happens when it's greasy ball. The replacement scrummagers for South Africa completely blitzed the English scrum. I think it was a complete whitewash on one of them. I think Alex Mitchell put the ball in. The scrum just went back at a rate of knots. The Springboks got a turnover, and that was a real statement of the Springboks saying, look, you may be in the lead, but we're certainly not done yet. So fair play to the Springboks there. Looking back at the sort of first half of the game, England gave away a couple silly penalties and got marched back 10 metres via some sort of silly stuff from Farrell and Manu. I can get what Farrell was saying about, I think it was Ryanak at the time pushing him, but when you've conceded a penalty, just put the ball down. At that point, the Springboks would have had to kick to touch and go for a maul, but instead they got an extra 10 metres, kicked the 3 points, and then when you're looking at such a tight scoreline, those things really matter. Manu Tuolangi got a penalty reversed via sort of putting his arm around the neck of Ryanak. I mean, it wasn't anything dangerous by absolutely no means, but he's just sort of antagonising them. Don't know whether that was part of the game plan, but it didn't really help England at all. In terms of the South Africans, as I mentioned, the second half scrum was just unreal and was the main driver ultimately to win the penalty in the last couple minutes. But in terms of the game as a whole, in the second half, the scrum penalty was really their key back into the game. The ability to kick the touch and really utilise some good field position from the scrum was really important to them. Springboks made some very bold calls with the subs, changing Manny Lebok for Handré Pollard after 30 minutes. And then they really rung the changes early on in the second half. Ryanak came off within 2 minutes of the second half. I think they changed Etzebeth, which I was shocked for Snyman, and plenty of changes in which really did help the scrum, especially when some of the bigger back rowers in the forward pack on the bench came on. They really added some extra power at scrum time. They stayed in the game very well. They stayed in touch and distance of England via the boot very nicely and ultimately struck at the end. The best teams find a way to stay in matches in which they're losing, and losing convincingly, in which the Springboks did. The big players stepped up for the Boks when it mattered. If you look at the likes of Pollard, he's your talisman, and he really stepped up towards the end. I'd say the big players from England really stepped up as well. Owen Farrell with the drop goal from sort of 47 metres or whatever it would have been. Marrow had a brilliant game. Laws had a good game. Earl had a good game. So some really good performances along the English pack, and the Boks had some good performances as well. The Boks were far below their best. They really struggled at points, but when you win a game, it doesn't really matter how you win it, especially in a Rugby World Cup. In terms of what the Boks didn't do well, they had so many handling errors, especially early on in the first half. They had some good field positions. I remember a point in which Billy V dropped the ball. They had the ball 5 metres out, or they've had mauls 5 metres out, and the English defence managed to either repel or the Boks managed to drop the ball. So if they're going to beat New Zealand next week, they've got to be a hell of a lot more clinical. The game didn't really go out of the sort of forward pack, to be honest. The back lines didn't really run at each other. All they were doing was kick chase, in which I really thought the likes of Johnny May and Elliot Daly did superbly in the air. Really troubled Colby and Arendtse and Willemse. Freddie Stewart at the back was a real rock at the back as well, so fair play to them. But yeah, it was a penalty from the Boks in the last couple minutes, which was ultimately the turning point. It feels incredibly sore, the fact that the game was won at the death by the Springboks after a scrum penalty against Ellis Genji, in which the penalty and the scrum in general for the majority of the game had been pretty competitive, but the late surge from the Boks with the bench really did change that contest and managed to get them over the line and secure the scrum penalty. From an English point of view, you can always look back at things in which we could have done differently, but we did very well to stay in the game, and we did very well to put our best foot forward and score 15 points and stay in the lead for as long as we did. It's such a shame that we couldn't hold out. We had 9-point advantage with sort of 15 to 20 minutes to go. I had my fingers crossed that would be enough, but it wasn't in the end. It's going to be the end of the road for many of the English players, especially when we look at sort of Dan Cole, Joe Marler, who had a really good game for England, despite me personally thinking that was a bit of a strange selection call. It ultimately paid off for Steve Borthwick. But yeah, it's a sore one for England to take. Sore one for the captain, Owen Farrell, to have to speak on after the game. I thought he spoke well. But Springboks emerged victorious. The champions do what the champions do. They roll on to bigger and better things in the final. Khaleesi came off early. I wonder what he was thinking. He came off at the 50-minute mark with sort of 9 points down, or at least 6 points down. But he had the confidence in his team to come through towards the latter stages, and they did just that. Gutting from an English point of view. I don't really know what to say, to be honest. I probably feel like I'm repeating myself. I didn't think England had that good of a performance in them. Not many did. The weather played into English hands, and we played the perfect game plan to beat the Boks, but ultimately it wasn't to be. Congratulations to the Boks. They played the game in which they needed to win. They turned up in the big moments at the end where it mattered. From an English point of view, it's gutting. It really is. I've used that word about 400 times in this video, but it stings. We weren't in the same position as a team which we were in 2019, which is potentially why it doesn't necessarily feel quite as though we've dropped the ball. We haven't dropped the ball. It just wasn't quite enough, as much as we put into the game. I hope the Boks go on and do well in the World Cup final. I wish them all the best. They won the game. They won it fair and square with that late penalty kick from Handré Pollard. If your big players can win those big moments like that, then one would argue you deserve to go on and secure your place in the final. But yeah, English point of view, it's devastating. Let me know your thoughts on the game in the comment section down below. It's not a game I want to watch back. It wasn't the rugby spectacle in which the quarterfinals were, but it was a gritty test match. in which the champions and the best teams always prevail in. So fair play to the Springboks. Go well in the final against New Zealand. I hope it's a cracker and sets the pitch alight. As far as this English team, I'm very proud of them. I thought they have massively overachieved in this tournament for what was expected. Me for one, I didn't think they had that performance in them, so fair play to them. That concludes my thoughts. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll be interested to read and see what you have to say. But yeah, thank you very much for watching.